Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Andrew Turner, host of the Praxi Pod, and today we have a very special edition of the Praxi Pod, and we have Andrew Ahn with us. How are you, Andrew?
Fine. Thanks very much for having me.
No problem. And where are you joining us from in this sunny day?
I'm joining you from Palo Alto, California,
Okay,
the
very
home
nice.
of Praxi Data.
That's good. Thank you for joining. So one of the things that we did, we've noticed that's happened in the last few days is a certain company called Meta, run by the illustrious Mr. Mark Zuckerberg, made an interesting market move with another company, which is a very interesting company. It's been running for a while, called Scale AI. And we wrote an article about our kind of take on this. And so I suppose today's special episode is Andrew Squared, Andrew and Andrew speaking about this topic. And so let's dig right into it. So I know that obviously we're going to call this episode a special name. We're going to call it Beyond the Model, why the future of AI is a data curation economy. Nothing like starting off when you mean to. And in terms of the size of the investment, so, to kick it off, I suppose, quick question to you, Andrew, is obviously it's quite a sizable investment that Meta have done, but what do you think it really tells us about the direction of the AI market? Because it's obviously, they put $15 billion into Scale AI, which I think is the largest private AI investment in the history of time, I think. So quite a big play here. And what are people getting wrong about it, do you think, in this, with this market move? Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, only time will tell if, Mr. Zuckerberg has buyer's remorse. All things considered, it may not be such a bad deal. I mean, obviously, Facebook has been doing a few things right. That's how they got to where they are now. I think really it underlies the importance of kind of a shift in focus. I think in terms of advancement in productivity and AI, perhaps we're not making as many gains around various aspects, and then really focusing on which, arguably we believe in as well, which is really the foundational components of it, which is the source of the data, kind of the foundation for all of AI going forward, which is really high quality data. Is it trustable? Is it reliable? And I think, although it may not be as flashy, that's probably one of the most fundamental and important things that we can improve upon today to make, AI and ML much better. So anyways, to answer your question in a roundabout way, it may not be such a bad idea. It might actually have been a good buy for $18 billion.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, I suppose there's been a big focus on, the size of the model, but now maybe people are realizing it's not just the size you need to think about. It's also what's actually in the model as well. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. I mean, getting away from the model fixation. I mean, really, it doesn't matter if your model is good if, you're just scraping data from the internet without really taking a hard look at the quality of the data that you're feeding the models. For instance, you can have a fancy Italian sports car, but obviously you need to give it the right fuel to go anywhere. So that analogy is even more true today about the garbage in, garbage out problem that's been around for decades. It's even more so.
Yeah, so jumping into the next question, I know that obviously for people out there, they probably know a lot about this, and I suppose this is why we wanted to kind of come at it from a different angle. So one of the things that obviously, in our understanding, a lot of people do in this area is they use a thing called reinforcement learning from human feedback. Obviously, we operate in the regulated industries sector, things like, insurance, healthcare, banking, etc., and obviously across sector with some of the stuff we do on privacy and identity. One of the things I think that we were talking about last week before we started this series of this discussion, and was about there's maybe something fundamentally broken inside reinforcement learning, which causes an issue when you apply it to regulated industries. Maybe you get some blind spots. I don't know if you've got any thoughts you want to share about that.
Yeah, I mean, supervised learning and to an extent, reinforcement learning kind of assumes that the data is already labeled correctly and is in a trustworthy state, right? Human beings are tasked with the idea of making that qualitative decision when training the models. But really, you take in this automatic process or automated process, and only automated part of it, right? So it still requires an inordinate amount of time and resources and specialized skills from humans, people, to make that outcome, successful. So I think there's better options, which I think we're going to talk about really soon. But it is the right way to go, supervised learning versus unintended learning or other options. But it does assume that there's good data.
And I suppose that's a segue to our kind of next point is about, we have obviously our hypotheses at Praxi is about the using experts to train data and to curate data and make it specific to that domain to drive the training. So I suppose, obviously this was kind of the genesis of some of your observations working in regulated industries from your background and obviously my background as well. Is what's your kind of how would you explain that to some people that may be listening to this episode today?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last part of it again, the question?
Well, I suppose for people that are not initiated in what does expert trained curation mean,
Yes.
if you could help the audience understand what that means through your lens as the founder of Praxi, to help them understand what it means to them and why it's different.
Yeah, I mean, if you could break up, training various models with unsupervised, which is using control sets to guide that learning, and then you have that supervised, you have human beings in the loop. The expert would be yet another level that's even deeper. And the benefit of that last step is that you have experts or SMEs, subject matter experts, that really understand specific area or scope, and they're able to provide a much higher fidelity and resolution to that learning, much higher precision. And really, it delivers a much better output, right? Generative AI, RAG AI would be just far better because you've got that subject matter. Of course, it has its drawbacks. You can't be an expert in everything. So in order to make it work, to get those experts, you need to reduce the scope. And that's, part of our contention, right? Praxi doesn't try to create a generalized tool or an expert assistant, co-pilot for everything. We really focus on certain use cases or verticals. In our case, we started off with insurance and sensitive data. And that's small enough for us to actually get experts and actually get a really good outcome.
No, thanks for explaining that. I think there's so many buzzwords that fly around this industry and generally, especially with this whole AI wave as well. It's kind of confusing. So thanks for clarifying that. I mean, moving on from there. I mean, obviously, in AI development, there's a lot of focus on it. There's a lot of dollars being put into it in the last couple of years. But some of the things that we come across is this thing called compliance. And obviously, with your background working in New York at New York Stock Exchange, sometimes it's seen as a constraint. So in terms of our kind of, I suppose you could say paradox, why do we think it's actually a competitive advantage? And how does it enhance performance using compliance in AI development? Any thoughts?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to look at it. I mean, compliance can be something that you fight against and you try to figure out ways around compliance. Or compliance is something that you can, work with, right? Just believe in the motivations of compliance, which is really to have trustworthy, transparent, responsible, outputs. And if you go with the latter case, which is what Praxi does, it can be an advantage actually. So if you start off with properly classified or curated data, the building blocks that you're using to build your project and to build your models from and your analytics, you know that they're trustworthy. You know that they are appropriate for use. And because of that, it actually makes the process much faster. When you take a process, and the more complicated it is, the more difficult this becomes, and you glue on a compliance or governance regime at the end, it can take a lot longer, and it may not be very good. And so
just a quick question. Quick question of that. Do you think then? So, in your experiences, that we get into this rework cycle? Is that what you're saying? Because if you don't start with a good foundation, then you find out that problems later with the data because you've not done that trustworthy foundation. That's when you get into this rework piece. Is that kind of what you saw before?
Exactly. So the steps are out of sequence, right? We feel that the compliance should all be sorted in advance so you can go faster. And in terms of productivity and ROI, I'm putting it actually not just in front, but throughout the whole process is the most effective way to do it. If you put it at the end, it may invalidate certain results. additional steps and refinements that are based upon that initial set, which may be flawed or non-compliant, would wreck and waste basically all that effort. So really, this is just not even just a better way to do it. It's also much more efficient and cost effective as well. And it's really around that philosophy. If you work in a regulated industry, there's really no option. This is the only way to go. It's a huge advantage. And really, thinking of it holistically, you're thinking with the end in mind first, you have to put compliance in there. And you have to constantly make sure that that compliance is taken care of.
I mean, when you were speaking, I was just thinking it's not like it's not definitely not a bolt-on. And it's also that kind of, I suppose, compliance design first thinking. Is that how you would articulate it?
Exactly. AI, ML processes, it's not like a Machiavellian effort, right? It's something that has to be, it's a practice of doing it correctly in a reliable, transparent way.
So one of the things, I suppose, goes back to, what Scale are doing. I mean, Scale have built, an amazing business, nearly $1 billion of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Is the challenge here that, and the thing I suppose they're going to have to think about in the future is it's a generic tool, and how do you traverse those types of workflow that you do have in a kind of regulated work environment? Is that kind of the where the gap is, or any thoughts around that?
Yeah, this is something that everybody must contend with, as well as Scale AI for generalized tools, especially in the AI ML space. If you don't specialize in a certain vertical or a set of use cases, you're really creating an artificial ceiling in terms of its effectiveness and productivity. If you specialize, let's say, like as Praxi does for property and casualty and life and retirement, life and health in the US and other markets, you can hit the ground running much faster. Even though we're a much smaller company, we may not be at the $18 billion mark, but we're able to focus, for instance, on specificity and specific meaning and the compliance ramifications for accord terms for policyholder or certain types of insurance instruments that a general purpose tool just wouldn't have. And to be able to leverage it for those types of use cases, you would have to train Scale AI every time. On the other hand, we pre-train in advance for those cases. And so that effort is already, included in the product in our subscription. So you just hit the ground running right out of the gate rather than having to train. And as we mentioned before, if it's not unsupervised, if it requires human beings in the loop, that part of it can take quite a bit of time. There's a lot of QA that has to be done over and over again. And then the whole compliance component that we just talked about comes into play. So there's a lot of anchors in a generalized tool, which you avoid if you can pre-train these models.
So I suppose the final question I got for today was based on this special edition of the Praxi Pod was if there's some people watching or listening to this episode and wondering how to future-proof their AI strategy, whether you're a CXO level, you're an exec level, or you're heading AI in a bank or a hospital or an insurance company, in particular, or a healthcare organization, what's the advice you would give to them? What are the kind of things that you believe we could help those organizations out with that's going to give them a leg up?
Yeah, so if you're a technology-centered or focused company, if you're Google, Facebook, or perhaps even LinkedIn, you're going to be off on your own direction and you already have a very mature plan. But if you're not one of those, if you sell insurance or sell other types of products, and your focus is not to have a gigantic AI shop, well, you're at a huge disadvantage. In order to make really good data-driven decisions, you really need to get to that first part, that curation and labeling part first. And to do that best is to have pre-trained specific models. So that's really the only way you can compete and have those high quality decisions that is comparable to maybe a technology focused or led, company. So at some point, all companies will be data driven. In order to get to that state, you really need to have high quality data. That's where it all starts. Without that, you're really at a huge disadvantage. So my I guess the closing line is, it really starts with having the right data for the right purpose in advance.
Yeah, and some of the things that we're offering at Praxi, besides obviously discovery audits, but also looking at risk mapping and things like that, and looking at how do your AI data pipelines, what's the state of them today, and how can Praxi augment that as as an API, or even using our UI as appropriate to allow you to get to a different place. Because as you said, I think that was a good analogy that not every insurer, bank, healthcare company has got the depth and breadth of talent on the AI side, so we can plug Praxi straight in and help you accelerate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the three biggest areas we can help is obviously the curation component. We have a patented process. We were awarded 4 patents from the US Patent Office to do that curation. And one of the things it includes are these complex structures. These are synthetic labels that we create from patterns, from one or many data assets or data streams. And you can't get to that level without having that pre-training, that highly developed, specialized library. So that gets you right out of the gate. This is knowledge that subject matter experts would already have in their mind, but a general purpose tool would absolutely not have. So that's the first part. But the second part is what you just mentioned, which is system integration. We contend that high quality data not only helps your AI ML processes, but really your entire data stack by synchronizing labels and metadata throughout all of your existing tools that your people are already trained on. It just makes them more effective, right? And it allows a kind of a nice way, an easy way to break down silos. You have data islands with different applications in different regions. We really help collapse them with metadata. That's the right way to do it. So we can plug right in. We work alongside of your existing stack, and we make all those tools better, as well as providing the first point that you made with compliance, building that in throughout the whole step. And we can recursively scan for compliance. And so in doing so, that compliance headache at the end is just gone, and it becomes an advantage. It becomes a negative. It gets turned into this huge, positive. One of the stats that we often quote, or at least I do, is that data workers and analytics spend half their time to 80% of their time just dumpster diving for good data, to making sure that it's trustworthy. Maybe not eliminate that, but we can cut that down by half. That's double easily your productivity or your staffing. So that's something that we can immediately help with. And the third thing that we didn't touch upon yet is after we have these good labels at the data layer, not the application layer, but at the data layer, we can create automatic actions. So when we find certain patterns, we can, and use APIs to interact with other applications, do alerts, send emails, send trouble tickets, or doing system integration. So we're actively not only looking for data, but when something pops up on your radar, you can go take action right away. So that response time is cut down. And it all starts with properly curated data.
That's something I was going to mention, actually, because I think one of the things that the conversation with a lot of the customers we're working with now is that it's switching. Originally, it was viewed as a very technical conversation, because we've actually, with our pace of the process, we're actually able to collapse that time through the curation classification. It then gets into that discussion about, okay, you've now got that, you understand the state of your data. What are you going to do about it? What's the policy? What's the action that you should apply? And you get into a business discussion. So it is the business and technology leaders, but it's actually the technologists can't make the decision around what to do with the data. It's usually got to be a business person or a business owner, which makes it fascinating, I think. That's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea really for productivity gains that are actually practical now, it's the next best action, right? Really, you want to surface like critical bits of data that are relevant, so they can act quickly, right? The right person can make the right decision. But you have to set the stage, right? And that only comes through having a specialized, focused curation process that's that's recursive. Yeah, we went to an insurance symposium recently, and one of the slides they had, and this wasn't actually even from us. This was from a large insurer that may not be in the U.S., but it's a very large insurer. And one of the things they said that on the slide was, all insurance companies are data companies. And the idea behind that is really as the leveraging of data, being data driven becomes more ubiquitous, the differentiators become less and less. Obviously, there's historical private data that an individual insurance company might have, but really, it's how fast can you react to new data sources? Everybody is eventually going to get these new data inputs. What do you do with them? How fast can you react to them? How quickly can you make adjustments? And how quickly can you make new products? And that really happens to deal with being able to get that workflow to be as efficient as possible, really to get that high productivity, that fast ROI. So we think that the critical piece that's missing now for most people is that data curation.
Yeah, and as we kicked it off, beyond the model, the future of AI is the future of the AI economy is data curation. And
Absolutely.
no, it's great. Great you finish on that, actually, because I think it highlights that our hypothesis of a number of years ago is now coming to fruition. Now people are actually seeing the same thing, and that same kind of event that we went to recently. The conversations are a lot more advanced now, because I think people have tried things out. They've hit a few roadblocks, they've hit a few hurdles, and so the penny's dropping about where Praxi fits into that. Where you get the competitive advantage, where you get the edge. So thank you. I was just going to say thank you for coming on this special edition of the Praxi Pod today, Mr. Ahn, and look forward to seeing you soon. That was Andrew Ahn, founder and CEO
Until
of
next
Praxi.
time. Thank you.
See you soon. Thanks a lot.